Safe to say Benjamin Netanyahu is grinning ear to ear today after blowing out the naysayers and technically remaining the man in control of Israel. However, there are many who see this as not boding well for the Middle East, for Israel, and in the end, the United States. Let's welcome to MidPoint Professor of Political Science at the University of Pennsylvania, Lustick joins us. Professor, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, Ed.
Professor, there are many people who say that this is not the best thing for Israel, for Benjamin Netanyahu to stay in power. But then again, there are those who say, wait a minute, he's a man who wants peace for his country, and he is willing to stand and defend at any length and at any measure possible. Where's the truth?
Well, it's not that most Israelis actually think that it's the best thing that he's prime minister. The swing toward him at the end came from right-wing voters who held their nose and voted for him because they became terrified that a government might form that would negotiate in some meaningful way with Arabs. You have to remember that the main slogan of the Likud was "It's them or us," and that is the tone of Netanyahu's campaign. That means that it's not so much peace that he was focused on. In fact, he hardly talked about peace at all, but the dangers that Israel was facing and that Jews would face from Arabs, he thought. That mobilized those right-wing voters to pour into his camp. He didn't really even try to go across the line toward the left or center to get voters.
But Professor, let me interrupt you for a second if I can. Does it make sense to talk peace when you have the Iranians who want to kill them, the Palestinians who want to kill them, you have Hezbollah, you have Hamas, you have all these? Does it make any sense to talk peace when it doesn't seem as if anybody else wants to come to the table?
It's not clear to me that at all. I don't think that's a correct characterization. Yes, there are people who want to kill Jews, want to kill Israelis. There are Israelis who want to kill Arabs. But the problem is not that there aren't people interested in negotiating peace. The problem is that each side wants something that the other side won't give it. The Palestinians and the Arabs want a real state in the West Bank and Gaza as the basis for a peace. The Saudis and the rest of the Arab states have said they want that too, and they'll make real peace. And half of Israelis, almost, are willing to do that, but the half that's in charge simply does not want to accept the idea of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, even if it were at peace with Israel. That puts the United States in a tough position because we would like, for political reasons and other reasons and moral reasons, to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. When the Israeli government takes a position that is a red flag to our other allies in the region, Prime Minister Netanyahu declared at the end of the campaign that under his watch there never would be two states. That's a red flag. It makes it very difficult to even conduct disingenuous negotiations. And the United States needs that cover. Without it, it'll be difficult at the United Nations and at the International Criminal Court to protect the extreme Netanyahu government that's forming from attacks from Europe, from Arabs, from others that will isolate the country even more.
But in essence, regardless of what they do, isn't the United States still going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel? Or, as some people are hinting, whispering, I guess, is it possible that Benjamin Netanyahu staying in power will force America to create some sort of a divide with Israel? That doesn't seem possible.
There is a divide. The question is how that divide gets expressed. Now it's expressed more quietly. The United States has not voted at the UN in ways that represent our true feelings about what the Israeli policies have been in the West Bank. But when the settlements start increasing again, when this government does things like try to annex parts of the West Bank, when they declare, or ministers in the government will declare vividly that there is no possibility of a two-state solution, the United States will probably start moving toward abstention at the United Nations, not to cut off aid, not to reduce military support for Israel, not necessarily to reduce intelligence sharing, though I believe that under the current circumstances, that is going to be de-escalated because the United States had such an intimate relationship with the Israelis on intelligence purposes. But when the political positions of the two sides are so far apart and so much rides on the United States being able to work with Iraqis and Jordanians and Saudis and other people in the Middle East, it will be very difficult to stand in that shoulder-to-shoulder way.
30. I only have about 30 seconds left here. Bibi staying in power, does this mean that war is inevitable of some sort, that he will push these buttons there in the Middle East?
No, I don't think that that's the case. Not toward Iran. The only place that we see a possibility of war is that every 3 years there tends to be a war with Gaza because of the policy basically that Gazans and Palestinians there should be reduced in power regularly so that they can't threaten Israel.
And here we go. It all begins again, and now we'll wait and see what happens in the future and how the administration reacts as well. Professor Ian Lustick, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, just when you thought it was safe to go back into the political waters without one of the more overplayed hands in decades, here comes the war on women again. And guess who's stoking the fires this time? That's coming up next, right here on MidPoint.